Good morning. Today is 11 February of 2021. This is my ninth morning message and the third of this series on the spiritual principle of the vow. You may find the links to the previous two in the notes. Yesterday we explained what the vow is and why Apostle Paul had his hair cut. He did not explain why he made that vow, so we shall do it now. Whatever we say will be speculation since he did not explain in the Bible. However, as the vow was completed at the time of his departure for Ephesus, he probably did it so that God would bless his journey. We also asked another question: what did Apostle Paul know that we don't? I think he knew that a simple prayer of a few minutes would not be enough for a good and safe journey, and also with open doors of ministry and spiritual fruit. He knew that he had to activate greater authority and power. So he applied the spiritual principle that would release greater power than simple prayers, and that would be the Nazarite vow. By contrast to today's superficial Christianity, whereby many think that God is their buddy and servant who is there to fulfill their needs, the early church and Apostle Paul lived a life of godliness and godly fear, given to prayer and to periods of devotion. Here is an example that shows how Paul taught his disciples and what it meant for them to be given to prayer. We will read from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 4 and 5. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Apostle Paul speaks about consent for the couple to abstain from sexual activity for a time, for the purpose of fasting and prayer. Now, obviously, this is not a prayer of just a few minutes or even hours. If consent was needed, the period of abstinence had to be at least several days, for sure, over a week. Otherwise, consent would not be needed. This is the same spiritual principle as the Nazarite vow, whereby the sacrifice offered to God is the devotion over a period of time with discipline and focus, which includes abstinence from usual activities of everyday life, which may cause distraction from prayer. In the Bible, there are many, like 70 references to the vow. They are not all about vows that involve a period of prayer, but they are all offerings of sacrifice of some sort to God. One such form of sacrifice offering is the prayer and devotion with discipline over a period, such as the Nazarite vow. Now, we shall only look at one such reference, which shows how God regards the vow made to him in Genesis 31:13. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you vowed a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. So when God spoke to Jacob, he addressed him as the God who received Jacob's vow. Wow, now that definitely puts some gravity on the vow, doesn't it? So the Bible reveals that the vow is an important spiritual principle and practice. Even so, it is a practice that for the most part is absent from the church life of our days. Instead of such solemn practices, many Christians have fallen in the trap of the cheap theology that claims, oh, I'm now saved and blessed. All is well. I do not need to do anything because Jesus did it all for me. So heaven is now guaranteed for me and I can just enjoy my everyday life. What is missing from this so-called theology is the need for man's cooperation with works of obedience and faith, and the wrestling with spiritual powers in the heavenly places through prayer and devotion, so that we may fulfill our calling here on earth. for which God redeemed us by the blood of the Lamb. The so-called theology produces sluggish and lukewarm Christians who do not remain alert and active in seeking the kingdom of God, but live powerless lives without experiencing the promises and the reality of God's kingdom. Apostle Paul, on the other hand, taught his disciples those things which he practiced, how to remain alert and active, living a disciplined life of faith with occasional periods of prayer and devotion, such as this year's month of February.